it feels counterintuitive and strange that what actually supports an opening of the heart and celebration of life is in turning towards death. And in that theme of picking it up in different situations of mindfulness turning towards some experience, an experience, turning towards death, face to face, enveloping it, holding it, permeating it. That practice is the practice that is included in the practice of liberation. And when I first read the Satipatthana Sutta, it struck me in a way that everything else kind of fit together. And then there was this paragraph that the Buddha expounded on the disintegration of the body as part of the practice of mindfulness of the body. So it's not like turning towards death, our death, is an add-on in this practice, but rather it offers us a deep invitation as the grounds for liberating our heart and mind. It's included in our liberation process to contemplate anicca, change, impermanence, and death. Death in the arising and passing of every breath, that is a death. In the movement of a sharp, striking sensation, and then it's passing away. In the putting into the mouth a morsel of food, chewing, and that passing away, we could say that in all these different experiences, eating, defecating, breath, sensations, sounds, sights, that all of it is about a birth, something coming into being and then passing away. And it is said that in deeply acknowledging this reality of life, what's the word I want? Is this a word? Permeates. How it permeates this understanding, how it permeates into everything that we're knowing. It becomes impossible for the mind to keep holding on and clinging. And so it's said that one of the most accessible doorways to liberation is the doorway of turning the mind towards impermanence. So this is very classic. So Ananda, when the Buddha was dying, it said, this is how they described it. They said, Ananda at the Buddha's death was lamenting as he was leaning on a doorframe, which means he had been leading on the doorframe of the Buddha's life, and he was lamenting while the Buddha was dying. And the Buddha, this is what the Buddha said, and it was his final admonition. Is that what you say, admonition? Ananda, haven't I been teaching you? Impermanent, subject to change, are all component things. And you also spoke about this. And when the Buddha passed away, Sakka, the chief of the deities, said, impermanent impermanent are all component things. They arise and cease, and that is their nature. They come into being and pass away. Release from them is bliss supreme. Just going to say that again because it's like the mantra. Impermanent are all component things. For everything that comes together, molecules of any type that builds into tables, chairs, bodies, everything, even radioactive molecules that don't die for thousands of years, eventually, all things made up in nature, which is what they're talking about. They come together. They come together into existence, and then they cease. And this is the nature of all component things. Release from them is bliss supreme. And then I just want to take a moment to talk about this anicca, which means the Pali word anicca, which means inconstant. And it's two words. Nicca, which is the private particle, refers to the concept of continuity and permanence. Anicca is the exact opposite. It's the absence of permanence and continuity. And there's something so deep about talking about the absence of permanence and continuity, that it is absent from all life and from all nature. So, having named this, then we also have to name that it's hard to open to. And it's hard to open to because we misperceive reality, and we misperceive it through our inattention. We misperceive it through our resistance, and we misperceive it through looking for happiness, through sensual pleasures. We know that nature is our great teacher in illuminating for us the cycles of coming into being and passing away. And that in the beautiful poem or writing of Thich Nhat Hanh, when he says, when you look at this paper, you're looking not just at a piece of paper, you're looking at a tree. And then you're not just looking at a tree, you're looking at the clouds, because without the clouds there wouldn't be rain, and without rain there wouldn't be a tree. And then if you're looking at the clouds, you're looking at the oceans. And when you're looking at the oceans and that cycle of water, then you're looking at what keeps the oceans alive. And so there's the reality that, like that piece of paper and all the many, many ingredients that create it, like the people who cut the tree down and the people who manufactured the paper, and then how the paper got pressed and made into something, and then how it got delivered, and the parents of those people and their parents, and that never-ending set of conditions that have enabled a piece of paper to come into being. And so the same is true of us, that without the billions of years ago, when there was a star that burst, that released into the universe the metals that are now in our bones and the hydrogen, then we wouldn't be here, and all the incredible conditions that brought us into being. And so this acknowledgement of the reality of our being as not a separate entity, but as a living expression of these many, many, many conditions that invite us into a relationship that goes beyond the confines of our skin and our thoughts and our conditioning and our history, into something much bigger. And so when the Buddha in the Second Noble Truth talked about the root cause of all our misperceptions is through the force of clinging, he was naming how our clinging, our holding on to the mistaken belief that we're not part of this incredible universe in an organic and related way, means that we then, in that holding and ownership, become really scared and frightened of change and death. So, just to, and you've heard me talk about this before, that when we think of how relating to our life, and there was always clinging because the Buddha talked about it, but how the concept of ownership has saturated this culture in ways that have solidified how we relate to our bodies. So there is such a deep sense of, this is my body, I own my body. And that place of, and I, because I own my body, can do anything I want to it, right? And I do. I push, I push this place of ownership into, I've mentioned before, I haven't mentioned before that sometimes they skip eating whole meals, but I do, and I know that, it's really a practice not to do that. So that's just one example, or going to bed late, or just the kinds of ways, or skip doing some of the things that I know this body needs for well-being. And why can I do that? Because I own my body and I think I can do what I want with it, which is exactly what happens in the composition of ownership. And that's when we own something, like when someone buys a piece of land, we think we can do whatever we want with it, clear-cut it, because it is our land. And that is what ownership does, is that it separates us from the sacredness of life. And so then it's no surprise this interrelationship that's happened over time, particularly in these economic structures, of how ownership has permeated into ownership of our bodies. It still is in some places that people own other people, and that relationship is destructive, because in the relationship of ownership, you can't feel the sacredness of the other human being. That's what clinging does. Clinging, attachment, and ownership obscure reality and create a sense of solidity and continuity. And so when you have a lot of money, like Howard Hughes, this always sticks in my mind, because he had a lot of money, that he asked to be frozen and embalmed, or maybe it's some frozen thing, so that dead he would live for hundreds of years in his apartment, some fancy apartment up in New York, skyscraper. Like that sense of, no, this is mine and I have to keep existing, because that's what clinging does. And all the suffering that comes from it. And it's like, so I'm going to admit this to you because my hair is falling out. And I'm like, it's like I actually felt shame. Like, because it's such a thing around hair, such like a thing around beauty. And there's something about aging which isn't considered respectfully. And I was like, oh my God. Rather than seeing my hair falling out, I have these kind of bald patches as an expression of my wisdom, and that I'm in more the closer to the disintegration process of my arising and passing away, some of those signs of the disintegration process, and seeing the sacredness of it. It was like, no, my hair, how can it fall when I don't want it to fall out? Or you see the beautiful grace of the tech crew coming to put the microphone up because the arthritis in my hands has weakened my hands so much I can't open the clip myself. And you should see some of the creative ways that I figure out things to do. And like I can't open the crystal geyser bottles. And so Brent designed this amazing contraption for me with like a Y with teeth that I slide and open it because I've lost strength to do it myself. And so here is this amazing opportunity that we have in the Dharma to begin to challenge that ownership of our bodies, of our hearts, of our thoughts, and of our feelings. To begin to challenge it through this practice of particularly looking at the arising and passing and changing of everything about our lives. Of everything about our lives. And so in every section of the Satipatthana Sutta, now I probably have, okay, I've read that one. So let's see here. So every section, this is what the Buddha says. So we contemplate our body as the body internally and externally, or we as practitioners contemplate the body in its arising factors. We contemplate the body in its vanishing factors. We contemplate the body in both its arising and vanishing factors. And we abide independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is practitioners, how we contemplate the body as a body. So contemplating, not just like, so of course I'm like, I can't do so many things anymore because of my fingers. So that, grieving the loss, right? Grieving the loss of the disintegrating factors, grieving the loss of our friends, grieving the loss of our parents, grieving the loss of what's happening in the earth and the planet. This acknowledgement doesn't mean not grieving, and it also calls us to this right relationship of understanding that we're part of something so much bigger than just each of us as individuals disconnected from all of life's processes. So this is what Philip, I've forgotten his name. Philip. No. He's a UU. He was a UU church practitioner, Unitarian Universalist practitioner, and wrote this in one of their magazines. And he was working with the thing that the physicist Hawkins worked with. What was that?
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah. What condition did he work with?
Oh, cerebral palsy, I think.
No, it was LS. Yeah, LS. Yeah. I can be standing in a room full of people eating canned peas, listening to bouzouki music, or discussing the price of ostrich futures, when suddenly I'm aware that everyone in this room will die one day. It does not come to me as an idea, as something to analyze or ponder, but as a quality of vision, as though my inner videographer had flipped on a different lens. But it's more of a feeling than an actual vision. What I see does not literally change. Rather, I feel as though faces, bodies, gestures have suddenly grown fluid, changeable, translucent. My awareness flickers between seeing these people as they stand here before me, solid and breathing, and sensing how the world will be when they have vanished. When received in the proper spirit, such experiences aren't frightening but liberating. For in glimpsing our own transitory nature, are we not seeing a deeper truth? As the scientists tell us, we're nothing more than temporary arrangements of atoms, forged in the depths of distant stars, consisting mostly of empty space. And I don't know about you, but it feels like complex as well. Like I remember sitting close to my friend Felice Yeskel, who lived in Amherst, Massachusetts, and was the first butch lesbian to start LGBT centers in universities, and the first LGBT center, when it first started, it didn't include non-binary. Now it does, and gender non-conforming, but in the beginning, she started it at the University of Amherst, and now it's spread over all the universities. Anyway, she was amazing, working class butch lesbian, and she had cancer. She got liver cancer, and so we were close, and I was there in her dying process. And as I've been with a number of members of our Sangha, do you remember the woman in Portland who was part of our Sangha who died? Was she in Seattle? Huh? Sandy. Yes, Sandy. She just came to me. It's, different students who I've been with in the dying process. And there's something that is so vulnerable, and it is so heart-opening and lifts up not only the beauty of the person dying, but us in our witnessing, that we become beautiful. And it feels so counterintuitive that the very thing that we're scared of when we're in the process is so opening and graceful and humbling, and like those rainbow dewdrops that we are, it lifts that part up. And so the Buddha talks about it, you know, all component things arise and pass away. And that's one way of talking about it, right? And then there's this other way of like not just feeling, but rocking, like more than just a feeling, like embodying the dying process when we're witnessing it. And so there's some part of us that is also getting, but not on an intellectual level, but getting we're dying too. And that it's beautiful. That it is so the opposite of the ownership that we have, which is so solid and entitled and uncaring in a way. This acknowledgement that each of us are dying, and like Philip Simmons says, that we in this room, each of us is going to die. And in a way, it's just lifts something so sacred in life's process, each of us individually, and in life it's arising and it's passing. So this is one of my favorite poems about this. This is from Becky Bertha, Forbidden Poems. So this is how it is then, to come to the other end of being loved. I flip the pages of my old journals, sift the years in my mind, keep searching for the reason, the mistake. I loved, I did no better, no worse than others. I changed in many ways, but there were those ways I could not change. In my garden, dying is continual. Red petals fall from a full-blown rose. The spider snares a candlefly. Impatience, do not return the following spring. But we who live in houses try to prolong the life of everything with endless probing, speculation, posthumous examination, as though death could be explained, prevented, as though without illness or injury life might last infinitely. No. Something is born and grows, lovely, is loved, reaches the end of its time and dies. In my garden, bleeding hearts winter over, and sweet alyssum recedes itself. So then to pull in some of the traditional contemplations that help us to connect and challenge the ownership of our bodies. And the Buddha, in the first foundation of mindfulness, specifically talks about relating to the 4 elements in our bodies, that when we acknowledge how we're made of earth, consist of water and air, and have the fire element in us, that these elements are part of the universe, and without them we wouldn't be alive, and that we can turn our attention towards the direct experience of them. So the earth element is experienced as pressure, and when we sit there in our buttocks is the earth element, the force of gravity against the cushion, chair, ground, whether we're lying down or standing or sitting. That contact is where we experience the earth element. And then the air element is in the vibration that we experience, and also, of course, in the breath. There's air, and sometimes we say my breath, but we know, and that's close, that it's not my breath, but breath, breathing. And then the water element, of course, we experience in all the places that are wet and fluid, the fluidity of experience. So urinating, saliva, the water around our eyes, in the water in our nostrils often, and any other place, sweating, where we experience our wetness. And this is how he says it. And further practitioners, a practitioner reflects on this very body, however it is placed or disposed, by way of the material elements. There are in this body the element of earth, the element of water, the element of fire, and the element of wind. Just as if practitioners, a clever cow butcher or his apprentice, having slaughtered a cow and divided it into portions, should be sitting at the junction of 4 high roads, in the same way a practitioner reflects on this body as it is placed or disposed of by way of the elements. There are in this body the element of earth, water, fire, and wind. So, it's a very strange way to compare ourselves as a cow butchered up. But what the Buddha is saying is like turning and focusing particularly on these elements as ways to connect with the universality, or to challenge the sense of this body is separate and is all mine, me, and mine. And then this is from the Dighanakha Sutta, number 74. Now, Agivesana, this body made of material form, consisting of the 4 great elements, procreated by a mother and father, and built up out of boiled rice and porridge, is subject to impermanence, to being worn and rubbed away, to dissolution and disintegration. It should be regarded as impermanent, as disintegrating, as void, as not self. When one regards this body thus, one abandons desire for the body, affection for the body, and subservience to the body. So, Ruth used to talk a lot about Carlos Castaneda, and how she was so moved reading that book that Carlos Castaneda said, to always live with death on your left shoulder, and that whenever you had a question about anything, to turn to death and to ask death, death, what do you think? How should my decision be informed by you? Let me see if I brought it here. I don't know if I did. To not turn to death just as an event, but rather as a way of living. Because in acknowledging our impermanence and the gift of that impermanence, we begin to live our lives differently. And so to keep our awareness of death all the time, through every day, of how would I live my life if I was guided by my death, or death. Because death visits us all. We know that every single one of us will be visited by death. And it reminds me of hearing someone in a morgue, someone who worked at a morgue, saying it wasn't so surprising to them, of course they worked in a morgue, that people were rolled in on the trolleys dead, but that who it was, that it could be someone who came in from a car accident or a motorbike accident, or two young twin babies because they were born but weren't strong enough to live. That we have no idea when we're going to die. And so it becomes this ground, right, of then going to that song again of how could anyone ever tell us that we're anything less than beautiful because we're alive. So when we talk about the continuity of mindfulness, we're answering that call of the sacredness of our life, that in making this incredible effort to be present and to keep supporting the continuity of mindfulness, we are being called to realize this truth about the sacredness of our life through understanding its changing expression. That is where the highest peace and blessing is experienced, is in that knowing the stepping, and then as we keep knowing the stepping, it comes that stepping is just taking place in the field of knowing, and there's no I. It's coming and going and coming and going, and no I. And as we continue to deepen and experience that in a more consistent way, there's a way the mind groks it and disentangles from the tangle of me, mine, and ownership. And that's why the continuity of mindfulness is so important and so beautiful. Or the inquiry into the elemental nature of the body. Is this my water? No, it's not my water. this water in my mouth that's called saliva, how can I own it? Is this sense of pressure and is mine? No, how can I call the sense of pressure mine? This way that gravity is pressing down on me. Is my temperature feeling fiery? Some of you feel a lot more fire in your body than I do. Is it yours? Is it mine? No, it's fire, the element of fire. So that query coming into it through these different gateways. And then there is the gateway of love, because love is actually the opposite of attachment. It is this deep intimacy and connection with what is beautiful and sacred. So let's see, then I will read. What do I want to read? This may be one way to end with. Before I do, I'm just reminded again, it's funny how it keeps coming back, that story about each one of us being a savior, you know, coming to save us. And then also the other side of it, you know, relating to each one of us, knowing that each one of us is going to die. And how that changes how we live with each other. And for sure, some of us sooner than later, because that's how death works. This is by Ellen Bass. What if you knew you would be the last to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theatre, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs, you might take care to touch that palm, brush your fingertips along life's line's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say thank you, I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she had just been with her aunt. They just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked half a block, and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? Do you have energy? Should I close, or do you have energy for one journal of a man very close to death? Yeah. This is Harold Brotke. Could we close that? It seems like it's so chilly. A little. Thank you. A little bit. Thank you. Thank you. It seems very chilly. It is very chilly. Thank you. Just for a moment, and then we'll open it again. This is Harold Brotke, who died. He was part of the It was part of the church I went to. I went to the UU church. There was an amazing minister there, just quite a beautiful being. So this is, and so he was part of the congregation, and so he had given her permission to read to us his last entry into his journal. Being ill like this combines shock. This time I will die, with a pain and agony that are unfamiliar, that wrench me out of myself. It is like visiting one's funeral, like visiting loss in its purest and most monumental form. This wild darkness which is not only unknown, but which one cannot enter as oneself. Now, one belongs entirely to nature, to time. Identity was a game. It isn't cruel what happens next. It is merely a form of being caught. Memory, so complete and clear, or so evasive, has to be ended, has to be put aside as if one were leaving a chapel and bringing the prayer to an end in one's head. It is death that goes down to the center of the earth, the great burial church the earth is, and then to the curved ends of the universe, as light is said to do. I have thousands of opinions still, but that is down from millions. And as always, I know nothing. I don't know if the darkness is growing inward or if I'm dissolving, softly exploding outward into constituent bits in other existences, micro-existences. I am sensible of the velocity of the moments. This bestows contentment, even a fearlessness. Separation, detachment, death. I look upon another's insistence on the merits of their life, duties, accomplishments, and see that most of this is nonsense. One may be tired of the world, tired of prayer makers, the poem makers whose rituals are distracting and human and pleasant, but worse than irritating, because they have no reality, while reality itself remains dear. I want glimpses of the real. God is an immensity, while this disease, this death, which is in me, the small, tightly defined pedestrian event, is merely and perfectly real. I am standing on an unmoored raft, a punt, moving on the flexing, flowing face of a river. It is precarious. I don't know that I am doing. I don't know what I am doing. The unknowing, the taut balance, the jolts, the instability, spread in widening ripples through all of me. Peace? There never was in any of the world, but in the pliable water, under the sky unmoored, I am traveling now and hearing myself laugh. At first with nerves, and then with genuine amazement. It is all around me. So let's take a moment. Quietness. Thank you for your presence and listening.